Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online video. This one is going to be my overview slash review of the Alfheim Online Arc of Sword Art Online overall. I've obviously just recently finished my individual episode reviews for this arc, and now it's time to kind of go back over it and kind of discuss how I feel about the arc overall. I did one of these for the Aincrad arc, and I will continue to do them after we finish each arc of the show. Before I get into that specifically, I'll just mention here right at the start, the next Sword Art Online review I'm going to be doing is for Sword Art Online Extra Edition, and I'll be doing that review on Monday. And Extra Edition is obviously the kind of OVA recap slash some new animation and a little new story that basically acts to recap the first two arcs and stuff like that. So I definitely think there's enough there to discuss some stuff about, so I'll do that review on Monday, and then sometime next week we'll get into Sword Art Online 2 with the start of the Phantom Bullet arc. But for now, we're discussing the Alfheim Online arc, and this one's interesting straight away just because I feel like this is the most controversial arc of the show, primarily because a lot of fans tend to not like it, and even if they don't mind it, they probably tend to rate it as the kind of lowest of all of the arcs that we've got of Sword Art Online so far. I think fundamentally a lot of where that comes from is just that Alfheim Online is not Sword Art Online, it's not Aincrad. And the way that arc ended, and the fact that it didn't get to floor 100, we didn't get to see every single floor, and then we get into this other new game and it's all about fairies and flying. I can sort of understand why people were so kind of a little bit upset when this happened. It was a really big change from what we thought the show was going to be at the start. Like, you watch the first couple of episodes and you think, okay, we're getting a good few seasons of the Aincrad arc, because really looking back on it now, the Aincrad arc of all of them so far, I don't know, I haven't really read or done much kind of reading about the Alization arc, but even then I can see that overall the Aincrad arc in terms of scope of like 2 years, 75 floors is bigger. I can understand why people will kind of be like, oh, you ended in 14 episodes and now you've moved on to this fairy stuff. And I felt the same way, but I feel that is a kind of bad reason to not like this arc. I think this arc deserves a lot of credit for what it does on its own, in that, okay, once the game is over, it makes sense for this to be somewhat of a kind of after the game of death story, that maybe some of the players didn't wake up and you deal with how they are awoken. You deal with some of the real life stuff that has been left unresolved with the person being gone for 2 years, and they deal with that very nicely here, I think. And I think at the very least this arc manages to capture some of the key emotional kind of core points that also Aincrad arc covered. But with that, the focus was heavily on Kirito and Asuna, and that's also here in the Alfheim Online arc, with Kirito trying to get her back. But it's also here in a different sense, in a more familial sense, with the gradual kind of healing slash coming together once again of this brother and sister, Kazuto and Suguha. And I really like the way that brother-sister relationship is done. But that's just a kind of brief introduction on kind of my general thoughts on how I don't really tend to agree with a lot of the kind of common criticisms of this arc. I really do think this is a good arc, and, you know, just describing my own kind of thought process, as I just said there, I felt very similar to a lot of people going into this arc, and just with regards to the way I purchased the DVDs, I think says a lot. The second part 1 and 2, which is the Aincrad arc, came out in DVD, I bought them, but I specifically didn't buy the 3 and 4 DVDs until much more recently, just a month or two ago. And the reason I did that was because I rewatched the Aincrad arc before even starting to do these reviews, and then I said I might as well buy the other 2 DVDs to just fully rewatch this, easier than finding them online. Ordered them, and when I rewatched it, I kind of said to myself, why did I ever feel that this was kind of lesser than all of the other episodes. This is really good, and it was really that rewatch of the Alfheim Online arc that made me want to review the show for my YouTube channel, because I just realized that, looking back on it, it's a really good arc, but because I'd watched the Alfheim Online arc so soon after the Aincrad arc, the ending of the Aincrad arc affected how I viewed the Alfheim Online arc. So that really affected things. But yeah, that's the intro kind of thoughts out of the way. So yeah, the way I'll do this one, as you can see, I'm not on camera in this one, I'm just recording audio, and I'll just put up some kind of relevant screenshots on screen here. Hopefully it's a more interesting visual way to go back through the book, and it may help me get some of my points across, having some of the images up on screen. But I'm just going to run down basically the key arcs / points, events that happen in this book, and kind of discuss and analyze how they worked well or didn't work well maybe over the course of the whole arc here. So we'll start off with Kazuto specifically, and the main arc that we get with him throughout the entire arc is that he obviously wakes up and immediately goes off to find Asuna, and what he finds is that she hasn't woken up, and it takes him basically most of his journey through the game to figure out why she hasn't woken up, and that Sugo has chosen her specifically, plus he's got a lot of other players to do experiments on about his whole influencing people's memories technology. But with him, his whole character arc throughout this arc is to get her back, to free her from the game, and he does that once he gets the first piece of evidence that she has been spotted in this new game, Alfheim Online. And he goes back into the virtual world after just being freed from Sword Art Online to find her. And that in itself I thought was a very interesting thing that they did with him, in that he fundamentally doesn't have any issues with jumping straight back into a virtual world. That he's not afraid, they didn't do that at all. They definitely made a big point of just his first kind of dive into a game since SAO. But immediately when he arrives in this world, he's interested in it from a gaming perspective, because he is such a big gamer, such a big proponent, lover of the virtual world, that he gets into it straight away. The idea of the concepts of flying and stuff like that interest him. His experiences in SAO don't affect his overall view of virtual games in general going forward, which I really liked, and it's not a thing they tend to do with any of the characters in the show. I like that they understand that SAO was kind of this once-off thing, and it doesn't impact their overall view on the game, because in many ways Kayaba doing what he did in the Aincrad arc helped a lot of the players to realize how important the virtual world can actually be, and that all of the friends that they made in there are so important to them because of kind of how crazy things were in there. That the fact that they could be so close to someone, even though they're in a virtual world, helped them to realize how important the virtual world could be. And that's the overall theme of Sword Art Online overall. Just how important virtual games / worlds can actually be if kind of used correctly. I'll discuss more of this as we go on, but with Kazuto, you get this idea that he badly wants to get Asuna back, that their relationship in the virtual world was real, and that you see that when they are reunited, that there's no need for a massive amount of focus on those two specifically and having an arc together as a couple, because that was dealt with in the Aincrad arc. All you needed here was the journey to go and get her back. You focus a little bit on them individually and their thoughts on being separated, but then when they reunite in the virtual world and in the real world, the main focus is just that, okay, they're back. There's no need for their relationship to restart or anything like that, because of the way the two of them both view the virtual world. That there's no need for their relationship to be set back to zero. That's why in their first meeting in the real world, it ends in a kiss, because they both care about each other in that sense. And so I can understand why Reiki Kawahara, the writer and stuff like that, decided to go for a different type of arc, that Yes, Asuna is going to get some focus. Yes, Kazuto on his own is going to get some focus, as well as their relationship, which is going to be the main canon ship going forward. But in terms of interesting character arcs, the more interesting one going on in this book, my Avatar fandom coming out there in this season, was the relationship between Kazuto and Sugaha, because they are family, they live together. She is one of the ones that was most impacted by him being gone in the virtual world in Sword Art Online for 2 years. And this was ultimately, I think, a really good decision for this arc. Going into my second kind of key point here, and that is Sugaha's kind of individual arc this book. And that is her as she deals with her love for her brother / cousin, and knowing that her feelings will never be returned, and how she deals with that. Because that's what her arc is. I know a lot of people like to bash the character Leafa Sugaha for being this character who tries to get in the way of Asuna and Kirito's relationship. But that doesn't happen. She never once tries to act on her feelings, because she knows that it is a little bit of an issue that they are cousins, that they grew up in a brother-sister relationship. She knows that it's weird, and that a lot of people would tell her she shouldn't be feeling this way, but for her, she does feel that way. And yes, Western audience, it's hard to relate to that whole type of relationship. But I think you can relate to this idea, just that someone has feelings for someone else, but that person is already in a relationship that they know is going to be there forever. And that's the case with Kirito and Asuna, and she realizes that. She never attempts to get in the way of those two. The only thing you really have with her is her just dealing with her own feelings, trying to get past them herself. And the way she tries to do that is by going more and more into the virtual world and gradually falling for Kirito there, but that causes kind of the same problem. And especially when, obviously, the two find out that it's their brother or sister that is on the other side of that other character. It is a really big moment, because she just sees this as, I've already had to deal with the fact that one person I've fallen in love with, I can't have a relationship with them. She's now had to experience that a second time. And I think it says a lot with her arc that they never do anything with her in terms of romance. They don't just stick her with Rekon at the end and say, okay, there's her relationship, she's gotten past Kirito. That the whole point of her arc was to deal with the fact that she had this love for someone that she couldn't ever get that relationship, and how she deals with that. And I like that how at the end of it all, it just comes back to the fact that really all that she needed, and what she's happy with in the end, is just that she has her brother back, that he's no longer distant or trapped inside of a game, that she has him back and they have a friendly relationship. She is happy enough knowing at the end that while, in a way, like, Kirito's heart may belong to Asuna, that there's a little bit of space in his heart for her, just because of their kind of brother-sister relationship. And that was a really nice thing to do, because that's what the whole arc really was about. He says to Silica that, back in SAO, that Sugaha must hate him because of how he kind of abandoned her and a lot of stuff earlier on. But in reality, yes, she was aware of that distance. She thought that her brother kind of, hated her, was acting like a jerk to her, but she really just wanted that relationship back. And it gives you a hint as to maybe why these feelings developed so quickly into love, and that when he did come back and was acting nice to her, she thought something had maybe changed in their relationship. So it's really interesting the way it's actually done, and just the way that at the very end, their whole issues, about her feelings and stuff like that, are resolved just by the fact that him saying that, okay, they have this common ground now, they both like the virtual world, they both play ALO, that Aincrad is now in Alfheim Online, Kirito wants to complete all 100 floors, and she thinks she's going to be left out again because she wasn't part of Aincrad in the first place. But he says that he wants to do it with her. He wants her to be part of his team, and that's all that was needed between the two of them at the end. So I like the way they do that, and again, they don't get around her feelings by just having her get together with Rekon. That may happen in the future, and that's fine. That relationship may develop more naturally. But I like the decision that they went for here, in that by the end of the show, she wasn't in a romantic relationship with anyone. They just focused on the brother-sister familial relationship that needed to be developed. So very nicely done there. The next thing I want to talk about is Leafa and Kirito's journey to the World Tree to find Asuna. So this is the main plot that we get over the course of the book. It's just that Kirito doesn't know this game. Leafa does know the game. She can help him get to the World Tree. And how their relationship in-game, before they know that they're brother and sister, is just this interesting idea of, like, he is this guy who's amazing at the game, but he's kind of clueless about a lot of it, whereas she's the expert who hasn't experienced everything that the game has to offer and is kind of being held back a little bit by the group that she's a part of. And through Kirito, she finds someone who she can kind of be really free with it, where Kirito is fine with just not being a part of a group. Being a part of a group, he's fine, whereas she's kind of part of this group that's very needy. They need her to be around and stuff like that, and she just goes as far as to join him and kind of become a rebel, abandon her group a little bit, and that it was interesting the way they did that and the way their kind of relationship in game developed, and especially just the idea that she's aware throughout that this journey that Kirito is going on is important and real, and there's something more to it than just the game, but she never probes or asks about it. She's just happy to enjoy this kind of thrill ride that she's going on with him. And when she does find out, after all of the kind of issues are kind of dealt with, she helps him. She gives him her sword to dual wield his way up to get through up into the upper part of Alfheim Online. She is supportive of him in the end because she knows how important this is. That the way that their kind of issues were really resolved in the end was kind of by him just admitting to her that as much as you think I've come back, I haven't really properly come back from the game, and I won't be back until Asuna is back. That I need her back before I can fully be here and be the brother that you need. And she's accepting of that. She's aware that he hasn't been quite all there since he has come back without her. So I really like the way that was kind of done over the course of the whole arc, and that links somewhat into the next point I want to bring up, and that is the Alfheim Online game specific plot that we dealt with in this arc, and that was this whole politics / issue between all the races of the different fairies, and how this linked into the group that Leafa was a part of before with Sigurd and stuff like that. You have the Katsi involved, the Sylph. This was interesting because obviously Leafa helps Kirito throughout the game, but I like that there was a little point here where Kirito returned the favor to her. He helped save her race of fairies in the game by defeating Eugene in battle and stopping that issue, and even going so far as to kind of give the Sylph and the Katsi kind of more of an advantage. So that was just a really cool thing, just to show the impact that one player can have on a game, and the basically one guy who chose the worst race of fairies can bring together people from all these other races that have been causing issues with each other. And they set up this whole idea that the races of fairies would never want to help each other because of the way the end game was set up, but he manages to do that. So, it was only like an episode or two that really focused on this game specific plot, but it was a nice thing to do, that they didn't just focus completely on the real world stuff and make it super serious, that there was a game aspect to this, that Kirito is entering a game that has been a game for a while, whereas Sword Art Online was only a game for the first couple of hours before Kaiba turned things around. So that was interesting to see a kind of a serious real world kind of plot happen in the midst of a game that is otherwise just a game. That all of the players Kirito is encountering in the game are just normal players, but they're getting in his way because they're just trying to play a game, whereas to him, it's life and death, even though if he does die, he doesn't die in the real world this time. So that was an interesting dynamic that we also got to see. Next thing I want to touch on is Asuna specifically. Obviously with her, she is put in a little bit of a damsel in distress position. I wouldn't go as far as to say that's a criticism straight off the bat, just because she isn't just helpless the whole arc. She gets attention and focus of her own. She is doing stuff on her own to help get herself out of prison just as much as Kirito is helping. And you know, the obviously the key moment is that she discovers basically Sugo's true motives and what he's actually doing with the other players, this kind of brain manipulation stuff. She goes out, sneaks out and discovers this, and in the process steals the key card that gives Kirito and Yui the opportunity to save her. So she is kind of the architect of her own escape through getting the thing that they need to save her. But I think it also shows some of her strength as a character, that she's strong enough to put faith in others, that she's strong enough to just, you know, hold tight and put her fate in people who care about her and she cares about. And that is the case with Kirito and Yui this book. Season, I keep saying book instead. I think that works really well. Like, of course, there's some kind of really creepy scenes because of the nature of our villain, but even then, they do this interesting kind of job of kind of balancing how she's trying to remain strong as he's kind of being very kind of aggressive and kind of creepy towards her, but also kind of trying to protect herself, in that she doesn't want to just be super aggressively like, no, don't touch me, because she knows that will only kind of egg him on, whereas she has to kind of hold back a little bit and then kind of know when to kind of draw the line, and she kind of protects herself pretty nicely in that way. Like, obviously by the end, you know, she is saved, she comes back to the real world, and Kirito has saved her, which I kind of like. It is a bit of a returning the favor thing, because obviously Asuna sacrificed herself to give Kirito the opportunity to defeat Heathcliff to end Sword Art Online, and I almost see it as like, this is Kirito kind of saving Asuna, paying her back for what she put on the line to allow him to finish the game. So I like that. Next, I want to talk about the villain, Sugo, specifically. Of course, like, he's much more evil, creepy, villainous than Kaiba, who, even in this arc, is revealed to not even be that evil. Like, he eventually became misguided, and to some extent, his actions were evil, but he's nowhere near on the same level as a Sugo, who, you know, he's trapping people to manipulate their minds, whereas, yes, Kaiba trapped people and told them to play this game of death, but he never actively, like, influenced them in terms of, like, forcing them to fight. They could fight if they wanted to. Otherwise, they could just live in the game if they wanted to. So, Sugo definitely kind of forced things. And the big difference is that they are rivals. You know, Sugo, Kaiba, we get that they went to the same school. They both have similar backgrounds in technology. But Kaiba was much more of a genius than Sugo was. And Kaiba cares about the virtual world and cares about the way people see it, whereas Sugo has no respect for the virtual world at all. He just sees that it's a place where he can do anything he wants. It doesn't impact him at all. Whereas the way Kirito would see that is that Sugo is a prime example of someone's actions in the virtual world really telling you a lot about how he is in the real world, which is completely true with him. He's just as much of a creep in the real world as he is in the virtual world. And in general, like, him as a villain worked because you hated him by the end and you wanted everything that Kirito did to him to happen to him. And the only thing that really saved him in the end was the fact that we as the audience and Kirito realized that he would be doing kind of a similar thing that Sugo would be doing if he killed him. So he spared him and let him just be captured by the police. So in that sense, he was a pretty good villain, and especially when it came down to the final conflict, I liked that the big thing they played on was the fact that even though he has all the power at the end of the game, none of it was earned by him, whereas Kirito honestly is a good player at these games and has earned all the skills that he's developed in the game. And just even the real world, he has power enough to defeat him when it comes down to it. So I thought that was an interesting way that they did this, that this was a guy who wanted power, but it was only fake power in the virtual world, whereas Kirito really dealt with the kind of issues of like, is his strength in the virtual world real or not? And he kind of realized that yes, it is not the best representation of his real world strength, but just his desire to save someone does give him strength in the real world or the virtual world. So I really liked the way that all came together. And getting into some of the final few points, I suppose the World Seed and Kaiba is an interesting one to actually bring up. I liked that Kaiba came back, and it really did show you that even though Aincrad and ALO are separate arcs, they link together so well because one comes immediately after the other and only happens because the first one happened. And Kaiba coming back to basically help Kirito to defeat the last villain works so well because Kirito and Asuna to some extent thought Kaiba that, the players can defeat the system sometimes. They thought him something different about the virtual world, that it's not just this super controlled environment, that like the real world, crazy things can happen. The players can change the way the system works and so on. And so, the three of them, Kaiba, Asuna, Kirito, and even Lifa, as of this arc, all see the virtual world as this place that is just as good as the real world. It's different, but it's still our real world. And then the World Seed I thought was a really interesting concept because it straight away brought up the idea that logically, virtual reality as a concept in the world, as a business, would be destroyed after the SAO incident, after the ALO incident. So of course, something like this kind of freely distributed platform to make any virtual world you want, the World Seed, would be the perfect thing to bring this industry back from the brink. And it does. It's something that all of the players that we see, all of Kirito's friends, have come to realize that they care about the virtual world, and it is something important, and that's the whole theme of the arc. And I thought the World Seed represented that very well. And it also comes into play with my final point here, which is the fact that by the end of the show, the epilogue shows this, Kirito has grown. He now has this big group of friends, He has Egil, Klein, Asuna as his girlfriend. He's fixed his relationship with his sister Suguha. He has Silica there, Lisbeth, and all of these other characters, even some of the other SAO players who weren't directly part of his party. They're all, friends with Kirito now. He now has a group. He is basically the leader of this party, as you see in some of the next few arcs, which is such a big difference and growth from where he started SAO in episode 1, a solo player. And I really liked how this arc explored why he is a solo player, that him finding out that his mother was actually his aunt and that Suguha wasn't his sister but actually his cousin was a big thing, and that made him go further and further into games to get over the fact that he couldn't deal with how his family situation changed so much, and that's why he was so always solo and didn't have these great bonds with people. But through SAO, through the Aincrad arc, he learned to deeply care for the kind of bonds that he has with people, and he has clearly learned from that, as you see with his attempt to restore that bond with Suguha in this book, despite the trials and tribulations that they go through. But yeah, that's most of what I wanted to say about this arc. I really like this arc, I think is the main thing to say. I don't want to go on too much about this because I've already said it a lot, but just if you are one of the people who don't like this arc, I just go back and watch it and give it a chance. Don't always view this in the shadow of the Aincrad arc, that the ALO arc is not the Aincrad arc. Give it credit on its own and just look at the core things that this book actually covers. And I think you will gain a much bigger appreciation, like I did all those months ago, for this. Because at the end of the day, it's just like, would you not rather like a part of this show that you like rather than hate it? But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to like in the Alfheim Online arc. I agree. I don't think it's the best. I think that the Aincrad arc is better than it, because I do like the world better. I feel the fairy aesthetic I didn't say that properly, aesthetic of ALO definitely visually is not the most easy thing to kind of get behind, but it's still fundamentally, you know, similar to the Aincrad arc in that it's still primarily swords. Yes, there's some magic and stuff like that, but it's still really high quality action and stuff like that. But that is basically all I wanted to say here. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've stuck around this long, definitely give me your own thoughts on what this arc is, how much you like this arc and stuff like that. Other than that, that has been my overview for the Alfheim Online arc. Definitely stick around for Monday when I'll be reviewing Sword Art Online Extra Edition. So thanks for watching this video, and bye.